I'm Dani, that witch next door, and you're listening to That Witch Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode here at That Witch Podcast. I'm Dani. I'm That Witch Next Door. I'm going to be your host, your guide, your mentor, and instructor in all things magic, witchcraft, astrology, and witchy business. And today we have the most special guest of all, I would say. Today, I asked my husband, Jared, to join us on the podcast for the first time.
Hello.
So, babe, first tell us your name and a little bit about you, what you do.
My name is Jared, and we'll see what I do is edit the show.
Yeah. He has a day job too.
Yeah, I work in sales at a fastener supply company.
Yeah. And then he's a prolific audio engineer. He wouldn't say that, but I will.
No, but 12 years of experience, so I've been around.
Been doing it a long time. If you've been around in the neighborhood long enough, and I guess if you pay attention enough, because I don't talk that much about our deets, then you might know that we have known each other and been friends for a super long time. What's the math on that? We're 20 next year.
Jesus.
It's 19 years right now. We met in 2003.
Yeah.
In gym class in 7th and 8th grade.
Good times.
Well, I don't know about gym class being my best times, but yeah, so we have been really close friends for a long time. We have a very long and ridiculous and cute story, and that is for a different show. But we're going to fast forward a little bit, because the reason that I asked Jared to come on today is because we have a interesting financial journey, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
It's a little different.
Yeah.
We made a lot of decisions differently than I think other people would have.
Definitely.
And it's something that I want to talk about more and more with everybody and in the neighborhood, our practical finances. I think that, not to digress into it too much, but I think that it's very much on purpose that we're not taught anything about our finances. And then we're dumped on our asses later in life, usually in debt. Most people are dumped.
Yeah.
Immediately from, and life crippling, because student loans are, my heart goes out to every single one of you.
Yeah.
Genuinely, because of those crooks. Anyways, there's a reason I believe that we don't learn about a lot of that stuff, but I can say that overall, I feel like you and I learned through a lot of experience and a good amount of research and our own trial and error.
Lots of trial and error.
Lots and lots of trial and error. Tons of patience. This story is going to span almost 6 years. That's just our financial track. But the whole point is to get everybody to start seeing themselves as the cool, confident financial leader of their home that they already are. They just don't realize it. I think it's something that we're just automatically intimidated by. And there's like this very, very slim population of the country and society that we deem financially successful and responsible and knowledgeable, when it's in reality accessible to everybody if you put in the time and the patience and commit to yourself, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So My first question for you, before we get into our actual story, I wanted to be able to give people a little bit of background. So I let you know that we met in 2003. We were friends forever, and we got together in 2012. And so we've been together for, Jesus, it's going to be 10 years this year. And then we got married in 2015. But before, which is honestly when everything begins, is right after we got married.
Everything was just a shit show.
Yeah.
For a while after that.
Yes. So before that, the first thing I would love for you to let everybody know is kind of, how were you raised when it came to finances? What was kind of your status and understanding in relationship to money? How did you kind of grow up feeling about it to bring us up to 2015 or so?
I grew up pretty ignorant about it because it was basically under the premise of don't ask, don't tell. Don't tell anyone how much you make. Don't ask how much they make. Don't ask how much they have, anything like that. You pretty much just don't talk about money with anybody else. And to save. Those were pretty much the only two rules about money that I got. Oh, and never put anything on your credit card that you can't pay off that month. I think those are probably the three that I was taught.
That's a good one.
Yeah, definitely some decent ones. But anyone who knows finances slightly knows that doesn't cover compound interest. Doesn't cover credit card interest or why you're supposed to do that. It doesn't cover taxes. It doesn't cover, mortgage, vehicle loan. Like there's so much more to learn about it. And a lot of those were all kind of find out as you go, as they come about type thing. And I had to do a lot of Google research as those things started to come up. Otherwise, it was those basic three rules, I guess.
And what kind of spender would you say you were up till that point? Not that I think you changed that much.
No, I've always been just push it off and I'll get it when I can afford it. And by the time I could afford it, I'm like, I don't really need it. Pretty much just audio stuff as soon as the new programs would come out, or when I needed studio monitors or headphones or whatever, a certain plugin, like those are the things that I would buy pretty much immediately. But almost everything else I push off and don't really. And even before that, I didn't really buy all that much. It's pretty rare that besides like food, I really didn't purchase that many frivolous things, I guess.
How was your relationship to wants versus needs? Like, how are you raised with that? And like, because that's essentially what spending comes down to me, is like your control and your judgment and therefore decisions when it comes to the things that you need versus the things you want. Versus what resources you have to cover that, obviously.
Right. At most, I think I had a pretty decent and healthy relationship with wants versus needs, although most everything, when it came down to it, I always thought was just a want. Besides food, shelter, transportation, things like that, basically everything was a want. So I think that's probably why I ended up not buying most things that I even wanted, because I'm like, I don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'll buy a pair of shoes and wear them until there's holes in the bottom. I have shirts from high school. I'm 32. I still wear certain shirts that I had in high school. A bunch of my hats are from college. Like I use and wear things until they fall apart. And some things, like guitars or whatever, I just fix and replace. There's a lot of things that I just like, well, I don't need a new one. I can just make this one work if I just change this out or whatever. Like my laptop, I think I've made last like 11 years.
It was 11 years.
So, yeah, I get my money's worth out of stuff. So I think most of my wants stayed as pretty hard wants, and I could push them off.
So this was stark contrast against everything I was and everything I was raised and how I saw wants and needs and how I spent, because I got a job. We both started working basically as young as you could. I
14.
started at 15 and Jared started at 14 because there was very, very few places in Colorado where you could actually work when you were 14 legally. And I think they just paid you below minimum wage, right?
I just found my first check. I think it was $4.25 an hour.
And I used to make $4.25, but that was at a serving job. That was, I still got tips on top of that.
I was picking up trash at a water park.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, if you're in Colorado, Water World.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they even still hire at 14, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, there's a certain age limit or whatever.
Actually.
Yeah, since it's a summer job, you technically don't have to pay minimum wage and you don't have to abide by the same age restrictions. But yeah, I don't know if that's still the same law. Obviously,
No.
that's.
We both started working really young. I was mildly taught to save. And when I say that, I mean like I had people saying like, you should save your money. And that was it. Like just a very vague blank statement. But just to be transparent, I mean, we spent pretty frivolously in my family. And there was plenty of, and this is super common, so I'm sure a lot of you relate to this too, is a lot of emotional spending, you know what I mean, based on how you feel that day and that thing satisfying your happy chemicals in the moment, essentially. So this is important context because we both learn a lot from each other throughout our journey. And shockingly, even though it sounds like I'm the bad guy a little bit here, we really did. I think that balanced each other out a lot over the years. So this brings me to the timeline here. So we get married in late 2015, okay? And in 2016, in January, so like 2 months later, my dad has a heart attack and a quadruple bypass. And then we basically just perfectly healed from that and got that under our belts. And that was when you started for the first time, like that was at the end of your job at when you were working nights.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted you to kind of let everybody know was that was the first job I know that you quit because you wanted to, essentially. You know what I mean? Not because of unethical treatment or what, you know what I mean? So I was hoping you could kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so right before that, I had graduated with an associate's from school that doesn't even exist anymore, but it was a electrical engineering degree. And so it was also my first job out of college that was like relevant to anything I'd kind of trained for. And yeah, they kept me on nights, and that's really the only unethical thing. It was one of those where they told me 6 months on nights and we'll move you to days. And I spent 1.5 years on nights, and I said, screw this, and put in my 2 weeks. And it was funny because everyone kept asking me like, well, what's your next job? You got something lined up? I'm like, no. I'm not working here. I'm not putting up with this. I don't enjoy it. The drive sucks. Like I don't care I'll figure something out. I'm gone. And so we had other people quitting and moving or something. And my boss had asked me to stay on for a month instead of just 2 weeks while they hired some people and had at least a little extra time to train them. I didn't have anything else lined up. So I figured, screw it. Let's just do that. And, I was supposed to my last day was going to be on a Wednesday, and that Sunday or Monday?
It was Sunday.
Sunday, I went to work on a piece of equipment that we hadn't been trained on very much because we were getting rid of them. And I was changing a brake on what's called a depalletizer. It goes over a pallet, pulls it off, swaps out the pallet, puts a system pallet on, and then slings the whole pallet back over on top and then moves it into the system. And when it was still in the swing out stage, I was changing the big brake that was making a bunch of noise, not knowing that once I release that brake, everything is coming crashing down, which is interesting because pretty much everything else in the entire everything else in the system, you as soon as you cut off power, everything locks up. So I didn't think twice about it. Pretty much as far as I knew, one of the only pieces of machinery that's going to move when you do that just so happened to be thousands of pounds. Came down, crashed on me, pinned me up against the base, and it was in a gigantic warehouse with forklifts and everything. So I yelled once for help, realized that was not doing anything. There's no way anyone was going to hear me. So I just had to pull myself out, and it took me to the hospital. I ended up calling my boss and Dani and telling them everything's okay. I'll be out in the morning. Big deal. Sorry. Come to find out that my tailbone all the way up to like my second, what's that called? Spine section or whatever, had basically been absolutely obliterated, crushed, and was in hundreds of pieces almost. Mm-hmm. They made it sound like every time they took another x-ray, they found more cracks and fractures, and then they take another one, like, well, there's a bunch more over here. And so I got surgery that Thursday and walked out of there on Monday morning, actually. Mm-hmm. And during that time, especially before the actual surgery, they kind of somewhat prepped me of like, I mean, you may not be able to do a lot of things that you were able to do. Like they didn't come out and say like, you might not be able to walk again, but it was kind of inferred. Like, we don't know what the actual internal damage is in there. It looks really bad. So, we'll see. For whatever reason, there was no nerve damage whatsoever in there. It was just all broken bones. So they put 12, like 7 or 8 inch long bolts all down my back through, and welded it all, like literally welded it together. Yep. Like some of my buddies from some of my jobs probably welded that shit, and they slapped it in my back, and yeah, kind of turned our world completely upside down, because it was, how the hell do you recover from this? And I had, my worst injuries were stitches, and half the time I even needed stitches, I never even went in for them. I just used tape or glue or whatever. So it was my first real experience of like severe injury. So it was pretty intense.
Yes, it was. And not just because of all of the physical part of it, but this happened, like he said, at the end of his notice.
Yep. Couple days away. I was already supposed to be gone.
There was a potential trying not to potentially pay for anything. So we had a little bit of that conflict with that previous place of work where he got injured at the beginning. And because of that machine, and how Jared explained that it was an outdated machine, it should have had the emergency brake system, should have been trained on it. There was a lot of missteps. So we also found ourselves at the beginning of our first settlement that we ever or only, we haven't been in another settlement. But so we also had a settlement on top of it. And then after surgery, it was really amazing because, like he said, they didn't come right out and say you might not be able to walk again. But what they said before surgery, multiple doctors said they didn't know why you could move your feet based on the what they could see on the x-rays, and they could tell he was separated in half, basically. They couldn't understand how he still had ability to wiggle his toes. So we were hopeful, but we weren't sure. And so it was obviously when he walked the day after, right? The day after surgery. Mm-hmm. It was this huge victory. And then we got to go home the day after that, which was awesome. But then we got the news that you were on medical release for a year.
Yeah. And that just kept going.
Oh yeah, they didn't tell us it was a year.
No.
They just said you were on medical release. And I think at first they actually only told us it'd be 3 or 4 months. It was really short.
It was really
I remember.
conflicting information because I was only in physical therapy I was in like the hospital doctor monitor physical therapy for a little bit, for like a month or two. And they're like, I don't even think it was 2 months, but they're like, you're good to kind of do the next step, which was a sports physical therapy where it was a little bit more active and a little bit more intense. And I only did that for another like month and a half, maybe 2 months again, before I was like, look, like this is kind of a drive for me. I'm feeling really good. I got a gym like within walking distance. Can I just do this at my own gym? And they're like, yeah, you can do that. So that was a total of maybe 5 months, including the recovery and everything, before I was completely doing my own physical therapy. And then just for months, every time I thought like, oh, I'd go into for my monthly checkup. I'm like, man, like I'm going to get released now. I can finally like look for work. And no, I think we should wait another month. And I'm like, why? I'm fine. I can do everything I could have done before. Like I feel good. What's going on here? And there was 3 months of that where I thought like by now I have to be cleared. There's literally no reasons. I got off pain meds like 3 weeks. I stopped taking pain meds almost completely because they prescribed me a ridiculous amount of Oxycontin, and that doesn't work for me or my body. And so I just stopped taking them because it's just better to deal with the pain and take ibuprofen than to deal with being constantly screwed up from Oxycontin.
Yeah, that sucked.
It was so many milligrams that I was just lost for those 3 weeks, and it was horrible. So I was like, screw this, I'm done.
Yeah, it had the whole entire experience had all kinds of setbacks and sidetracks you never could have called ahead of time, on top of the giant setback that it obviously was. Because about a week or two, no, it was about a month. It was barely before. About a month before, I had verbally confirmed plans to start my first business with 2 of my friends. And about 2 weeks before your actual injury, we filed for the LLC and we were official. So I have this brand new business that's retail, by the way, which requires capital that we did not have as far as a loan or investor goes. So that's out of pocket. He's on medical release. We do have medical expenses being covered, thankfully. We ended up getting that figured out. And then with the job. And then we still have the settlement, whole entire thing going on in the background. And then this takes us to 2017, which, when did you finally get released? Which month was it?
July, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I have a screenshot somewhere of the actual paper. I was so excited.
Got off of medical release and officially able to start the job hunt again with kind of a whole brand new spirit. Like what was kind of your attitude and stuff toward getting back to work after that? Mine,
because we had probably like 6 or 7 people say the exact same thing of, well, if that happened to me, I'd never work again. I'd sue them for everything they had. And I was like, you know what? Fuck you guys. I'm not doing that shit. And even to one up that shit, I'm going to go and do the exact same type of work. I'm just going to enjoy the job more. And that's what I did. I had a pretty kind of FU attitude where it's like nothing is going to stop me from doing anything that I would have done before. So I ended up looking for more manual labor jobs and ended up finding one in September. That was a pretty decent one where they're making custom gas extraction devices. It was actually pretty damn interesting. I've never seen anything else like it. I mean, there literally is only like 2 other companies in the entire world that do what they do. So that was pretty exciting. And I went right back into lifting and carrying heavy stuff and working on, on my knees on concrete and, just putting my body through the ringer again to just prove that this wasn't a setback. It was just a quick little stutter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went in with that mindset for the next job.
Now, this brings us to the next mini shitstorm, which is end of 2017. We get pregnant, and this is first round with credit card debt. So you tell your side of your credit card debt before I tell my side of my credit card debt.
So mine was
because they were separate. Like
yeah.
he had this is like literally his card versus mine. Yeah.
Mine was just a very slow and gradual. It built up $1,000 basically a year from starting in like 2011, 2012 or something. When I first broke the third rule of not paying off everything that I could pay in cash from my credit card. And then I was like, I can just keep a running balance and then I just pay a fee for it, like big deal. And then that turned into a little bit more and then a little bit more. And then I was like, man, I got like $2,000 I got to pay off. Let me get this straightened out. And then I'd kind of get close. And the next thing I know, I'm like, shit, I got fucking $4,000 I got to pay off. And by the time a little bit before the accident, I think it was like $7,000 in credit card debt. And that was by far the most debt I've ever been in my life. Cause I paid for my first car, I paid cash.
Mm-hmm.
I never had a car payment. There was never a time in my life that I owed money until credit card debt. And then it just kept going and going. And the next thing I know, when it was that much, every time you throw money at it, as anyone who's ever been in credit card debt knows, is you throw money at it and somehow you still owe more than when you sent that last check. Like every time, like, I swear to God, I just put like $1,000 towards this shit and somehow it's an extra $200 that I owe now. Like, how is this working? And yeah, that's their point. That's why they want you to have a credit card, is so you get in that situation where you're constantly paying the fees, but it's not going down.
Mm-hmm. How did you end up getting out of that first round? Because you did it without me.
Yeah, it was during that whole time of
secret. You didn't even tell me about your credit card debt till after you paid it off.
Yeah, it was just before I had really just made it a point. Like, I don't care how hard it's going to be. I don't care what expenses I have to cut out, and I'm just going to do it. And before we got the settlement or anything, I actually paid it off with workman's comp checks, which are, I think it was like 60% of what I was getting before, something like that, 70. It was a decent amount. It's more than what I know some other people get from workman's comp. But yeah, I just did that, and I refused to like pull out my credit card for anything that was not life sustaining, basically.
Mm-hmm.
If there was any other expense, sorry, sucks for you, dude. You put yourself in this goddamn debt, so just you're dealing with it. And for, I think, 8 months it took me to pay off all that debt.
Damn. Now, you got that credit card. Like he said, he had a gradual build. I got my first credit card like the week before you were in the hospital, or like while you were in the hospital. I mean, it was right around that time. And just full transparency, we're paying super discounted rent because we're renting Jared's grandma's house from her. So we're paying super discounted rent. I was working full time, and obviously before the accident, Jared's working full time. So we have 2 full-time incomes, and I'm spending money the way that I've always spent money since I was 15 years old and got that first job, which is like to the bone every time. Like when I was in high school, I would get, you get your 2-week paycheck. And at the beginning of that week, I was like Chipotle every day. And like, I'd go out, like I'd live like a fucking king for like 4 or 5 days. And then that's when the panic would start to hit in. And then I'd be like going to Taco Bell and then Wendy's. And then slowly but surely, if you're from Arvada, this is a throwback, but you could go to Blackjack Pizza in Arvada and get a whole bag of breadsticks for 50 cents and a soda for 75 cents. And it was awesome because you could actually dig up change in your car and go have a full meal. And that was exactly what the second week looked like before I got paid again. And the whole thing started over. And so this is definitely me all the way through till the accident, and just spending, like I said, how we did in my family, like emotional spending. So if I'm out at the mall or wherever it is, I just buy stuff because I want to. And so we get pregnant, and I have this business that I've started with my friends a full year before that. And, we're just telling ourselves out of reassurance, like, it could take 5 years to turn your first profit, especially we were doing handmade retail. Like, this wasn't drop shipping or resale. You know what I mean? Like, this was about as difficult as you could make it. Not in a bad way. We were trying to be quality and everything, but still, it was still about as difficult as you could make it. And so I got my first credit card right after we started the business with the intention to use it similar to a business loan, because we couldn't get approved for a business loan. But then when the accident happened, it was this source of investing in the business for myself. And also I put a lot of our like convenience meals and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like during that really, really stressful year, like that's just, I told myself the whole time that it was out of necessity. But when I really look back at that credit card debt, like it really wasn't out of necessity because I still had a full-time income. And so by the end of 2017, maybe a month before this, Jared has just confessed to me that he had credit card debt, but he paid it all off and he's all happy and relieved to tell me. And he's telling me this and I want to vomit because I'm secretly hiding credit card debt from him at this point. And at that time, it was probably at like, who knows, 8,000. But then a month goes by. I was probably just, I don't know, just over like 2 or 3 months pregnant. It was so early. It was so early. And the stress of lying to you about it was eating me alive. Like I could not, and nobody knew. I didn't tell my friends. I finally ended up telling my best friend at the time and my mom. And the night I told my mom, I'll never forget. And this is part of the reason I wanted to tell this story, because I ended up we lived by this advice for years after this, and we always will now. But I'm confessing all this to her and I'm just sobbing at the dinner table. Like, I've been keeping this. He's going to leave me because I lied to him and because it's so high. We had just gotten the settlement, I think, like just got it. And I was at $9,000. I was just over $9,000 on that card by that point. And I'd only had it for a year. People, I had it for a year. We went a little nuts. It was very classic American. Like, I'll be honest with you. It was very classic mid-20s American girl. Like it just, wow. And what, like Jared said, once that fucking interest payment period, because it was the 0% for a year, and you tell yourself, I'll pay it down before then. I'll pay it down before then. And the moment it hits, it's almost impossible. It is almost impossible. So I remember crying to my mom about it, and she told me, you are saying, by not telling him and by lying to him, you're saying that money is more valuable than your relationship, that he or you values money more than the other person. Otherwise, you trust him to tell him this. So you need to go tell him this. So I like literally left dinner almost at that moment and came home to tell you, and probably scared the shit out of you when I got home and was like, I have to talk to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I do remember. I was actually relieved with what it was. I was like, oh, thank God. Okay. That sucks, but okay. I can deal with that.
And I just confessed the whole thing to him, and I cried my eyes out. And I remember being so worried that he betrayed his trust. I remember being worried about the stress on the baby because I was so early in pregnancy. Like, that was one of our first, like, biggest financial hardships that we went through. And I will never forget you piggybacking basically what my mom said with your quote, because you came over and hugged me and you were like, it's just money and we'll always make more. And those two things, those two principles, I'm telling you, have probably carried us through the darkest of our financial days. And they get much darker than this, folks.
Yeah.
This was the buildup, actually.
Maybe not as intense, but yeah.
I don't know. It got terrifying. It wasn't as intense as the injury is intense, but okay, so this brings us, so we're now entering 2018. We used the settlement money to pay off my credit card. And he's like, you can't use the credit card anymore. And I put the credit card away. And that really was the beginnings. We were not overnight, okay? No one is. But that was the beginnings of a very big financial habit shift. I was still working at my job. You were still working at your same job. And that was when we started, not super consistently, but bringing our lunches.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yep. At that time,
it took a while to get used to it.
Yeah, to do it every day. But back then it was a lot more common than it was, because shit, I never brought my lunch a single day up until that point.
No, we were chronic out to eaters. And
every
he
single
at least
time
is going to fucking Taco Bell and stuff and trying to be cheap. And meanwhile, again, the little high school girl over here, she never went anywhere. I'm spending on nice stuff, especially mid to late pregnancy. I didn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
I didn't give a shit. I'd go to 3 different restaurants at lunch to get a thing I wanted at each one.
Yeah, and I'd find the cheapest place possible and get some. Like, there was plenty of times I skipped lunch too, because I prior to the accident, that became a habit for me when I was in credit card debt. That was part of it. Even though I said, if it wasn't to sustain, I got really used to skipping lunch and eating one meal a day. Yeah. So I did a little bit of that again. Yeah.
That's what starts really compounding your stress too. And that's why I always want to validate people's financial stress, because it literally limits your ability to meet your basic needs. The needs that provide you with the strengths, the physical and mental strengths you need in order to help yourself get out of that situation.
Yeah. And of course, at the time, I'm thinking I'm being strong and doing what I need to do, without realizing, like, no, you're just damaging yourself in a different way. Like, it's helping finances a little bit, kind of, I guess, but it's not helping your health whatsoever. It's not helping your mental health whatsoever. Like, all these other things are much more important than just finances, especially in your 20s. Come back from fucking anything in your 20s. Yeah. But when you're in it, I mean, the world's ending. Like, unless you get this shit figured out, your world is over as you know it. And it sticks to you. It sucks.
Yeah. Most of our journey was learning how to meet the basic needs.
Yeah.
And it started by totally bypassing them and having to learn the fucking hard way, basically. And go, so we can't just totally neglect ourselves in order to fix this situation. Okay, how do we reconfigure? So we go into 2018. Keep in mind, I'm still working full-time. Jared's working full-time. I have my other business, though, that I've started with my friends. And we're in full-fledged business, but we're not cutting checks. That's all. We're turning... And actually, by mid-June, is when we have our next big shift in everything, because I had always wanted to prioritize being a mom over my job. And I wanted a job that gave me the freedom to be with my kid as much as possible during these earliest years, essentially when you have the most time with your child. And so we had already planned, I'm pretty sure before we even got pregnant on that plan. I think we had talked about that, right? Yeah. So that was one thing that I will say. And it helped that we were friends for so long, but we've always been really good about talking about stuff. Well, we got really good at talking about stuff. We've always been honest with each other, but the conversations got more civil and respectful and mature over the years.
Definitely more mature. There's plenty of complete random bullshit, unnecessary talk. Still fun, but it's 18, 19, 20-year-old talk.
So yeah, it got a lot more productive. And so we talked about that before. So that was always the plan. By June, baby is due in July, so I'm extremely fucking pregnant. I'm about to quit my job at the end of June, and we get this opportunity for our, what was just an online store, to rent what could be potentially becoming a storefront. And that was something that was off our radar, that we didn't think was going to be possible for several more years. So the three of us decided on doing that. So not only do I quit my job at the end of June, we sign a shop lease. So we sign a rental agreement. We're not cutting checks, right? So that got paid out of pocket for, I think, 6 months, which wasn't bad, I will say. I think it was about 6 months we had to, the three of us split rent and had to pay that. And we personally are on one income at that point. Doing that. And now we've just added. And then in May, so right before that, we bought our house from Jared's grandma. And we used the rest of the settlement money for our down payment.
Most of it. Because we also,
a little bit of it.
Yeah, because you got a car.
We traded in for my mom car. I forgot about that. Yeah.
A couple months after that. And then in February, the following February is when I traded in my car and got my truck.
Right. Okay.
So there was a little bit left over for that. I invested a couple thousand too. So the majority of it definitely went towards the down payment, but there was a couple thousand left over that got mixed and matched here and there.
I forgot about that. And so we have this extra shop rent. We also have real mortgage now, right? We had been paying little kid rent, basically.
Yeah.
And now we're paying grown-up mortgage payments, plus this extra rent payment every month, plus we're on one income. Oh, and we just have a child in August. 2 months after this. And wow, to say... I noted on here, 2018 to 2019 was a special kind of stress around here.
Yeah, it was.
Holy shit. That was really intense. I had postpartum anxiety, a little bit of postpartum depression, but mostly postpartum anxiety. And that is when you are starting to feel dissatisfied with your job.
Yeah. Again, I had been promised a raise at a certain time, but because of my hiring time, they were going to delay it because everyone else had their interviews and their raise period at the same time. So I was like, fine, screw it, whatever. That time came around and the company just wasn't doing so hot because just all of our three biggest clients, one wasn't paying us, and I think the other two fell through. Or one of them was like taking forever to finally make a decision. It took like 4 years for them to finally decide they wanted to use our equipment, but we had planned on them deciding within months, and so that was their excuse to not give me a raise. And I went to the CEO, or no, not CEO. I went to I think it was the VP at the time, and told him, like, this is just kind of unfair to me. Everyone already got theirs. I got promised mine. I'm the only one getting fucked over here. Like, can we figure something out? And I'd show them exactly why. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm due for one. It was, I did this. I learned this new skill. I do this for you guys. I go above and beyond. I know I'm worth more than I'm being paid. And his response was literally, well, if you think you can make more, go find it. So I said, okay, bye. Fuck you. And so then HR and the owner immediately called me back and was like, please don't leave. It's not the raise you deserve, but we can get you something. Please do not leave. And I was like, fine. I mean, I'll hang out for a little bit. And that was in April that happened. But I had the same feeling that I had from the job before of like, just get the hell out of here. Again, nothing lined up, but I can find work. I'll figure it out. And I instead of leaving, I hung out, and was that April to September, however many months that is. In September, they call us all into the office and let us know that they're really struggling financially. So they're laying off about 75% of the entire company. And I just said, thanks, and left because I was so pissed. Oh my God. I was so mad that I didn't listen to my gut and just leave when I knew I should have. And so came home, got completely blasted out of my mind drunk. I drank a ridiculous amount of, like, basically the majority of a bottle of tequila, and gave myself a little pity party. And the next day is when, because we had already been doing our own horror podcast at the time. Mm-hmm. And I for a while wanted to figure out what kind of business I wanted to start. And then that next day is when I said, screw it, I'm starting my own podcast editing business. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't care. Because I was so furious with myself. I kind of said, I don't have any more time. Like, I had all this time to figure it out. I knew this company wasn't going to work out. And, now's the time. It was a pretty harsh setback after what we had already gone through 2 years before that. Mm-hmm. And so that's when my business came about.
Mm-hmm. Was at the end of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, 2019 looks like our shop that we rented is now officially open to the public. Before then, it was mainly storage and a place for production or making all of our product and like shipping. And then by April of 2019, so almost a year after we had signed the lease, we were able to open up to the public in Denver. And it took about, 2019. It took about, I would guess, 3 or so months after public opening to start breaking even, which did help because the shop's overhead became covered, and it finally, for the first time in 3 years, was not something we had to spend our money on out of our own pocket. And so that's a huge reason why 2018 to 2019, like I said, was this special kind of stress, because we have this genuine, like, legitimate stress. I mean, like, we have a kid, we have bills that we have to pay, we need to sustain ourselves and buy food and stuff. And we have these goals and these dreams and these morals and these values that we're also not willing to compromise on. This is why I like talking about our situation, because we all get faced with that dilemma. And this is not a show to tell you to fucking quit your job tomorrow, but this is a show to teach you about the kind of resiliency that I do promise is in you. It's the kind of conviction I do promise is just in you because you're just a human. But we never once full-blown threw in the towel on anything. No matter what, we overall maintained our morals, which were, and like I said, our values, which were eventually we are going to be fully self-employed. we are paying ourselves. That is going to be like, we are going to have complete autonomy over our schedule. I assume for you, that's your main driver, right? That's always been mine.
Yeah. Well, for me, I basically never grew up out of being like 16 years old. And when I just would get pissed about people telling me what to do, and still 32 years old. And as soon as someone tells me what to do, I'm like, no, I'm going to do the opposite, actually. So that's where a lot of mine comes through, is mostly being immature and not like being told what to do.
But it's that drive to want complete freedom and control and say over your time, essentially. That's why I always talk to you guys about how insanely valuable our time is, because we fought for ours for 6 years.
Yeah.
Literally through thick and thin. And so when I say we don't compromise, I'm still home with my kid as much as possible. Jared is basically throughout different times working a job to help fund me and my business and my dream, with our intention. Okay, so since you got the head start, like once you kind of get a leg up, then it's going to be my turn, kind of a thing. And you're going to help fund my side of things. And the downside is, and the truth is, that day just wasn't fucking coming. And that's why it was so hard. And it was like day in and day out, there's no extra money coming in. And there's a whole lot of money going out. A lot, because we have a kid.
Yeah, all of it.
Yeah, all of it. And so through this time, our daughter was born in August of 2018, like I said, and we never bought baby food. So we implemented fucking firm systems into our, like, we came so far from that first beginning of 2018 or so, or end of 2017, of sort of making our lunches, but not really, to there is no compromising. If you don't want to, me to myself, if you don't want to go get a part-time job somewhere else, because we knew if we did that, it was just going to set back.
Yeah, the time frame is going to be, who knows how much longer, but it's going to be longer.
Right. And now that the shop's open to the public, I'm running a shop. Now I have almost full-time hours of a job again. And so we basically had to make some decisions on, if we're not going to negotiate on this, what can we negotiate on? And going out to eat was not an option.
Once every 3 months or so.
If that.
Yeah.
Like literally for 2018 to 2019, it was almost literally never. We were so strict about it. I bought food based on what coupons got mailed and what was on sale. And I meal planned based around sales like that, like a motherfucker. If we had a tiny bit of like wiggle room, I would use it to stock on something else. And I would make sure, like, I seriously had it in my head the whole time. Like, as long as we have the basics so that we can feed ourselves, as long as we have the basics so we can feed ourselves. And that's why I made all of the baby food. I should have clarified that. We didn't not feed our daughter when I said we didn't buy baby food. I made all of it. I went and bought fresh and frozen produce, and I would make like lean proteins and stuff. And I made all of her baby food, remember? And I'd freeze all of it. And literally, we never ended up, that was one of my most, I will say, I'm very proud of that, because that was just a big accomplishment that I.
Yeah, when she could finally get to oatmeal though. And like the next step right beyond baby food, man, that was awesome.
Yeah, it was. But we made all kinds of, so like oatmeal is a silly, like that's a perfect example, because everyone's telling me to go get the baby cereal, but make sure you get the oatmeal, don't get the rice cereal. I can't remember why people were saying that, because I have no opinion. If you feed your kid rice cereal, it's plenty good for them. I can't remember why, but anyways, we were getting oatmeal cereal, and I'm at the store and I'm about to buy it, and it's in this dinky little thing, and I'm like, isn't this just ground oats? And yeah, that was our mindset. Every single time I was at the store or anywhere, like, how can I make this cost less money? And I, like Jared said, when it came to skipping lunch, like, I'm not saying that that felt good or did any good to our mental health. Like, it was seriously so crushing to have to live that way for so long.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when you keep telling yourself like another month it's going to be different. Like it has to. We're putting in all the work that you read any self-help book, you read any business book, that we're putting in the work and then some of what everyone says you need. Okay, one more month. Okay, one more month. We're getting close. I know we got to be getting close. All right, one more month. And it was just like that month after month after month after month.
It became years. That's not a joke. That's why I tell people this stuff, because that's why you fucking biz coaches you see on Instagram with your fucking 6 figures overnight. There's something behind that. I promise you. Realistically, I'm not saying it takes literal years for everybody, but I am saying that's a far more realistic timeline than what we were led to believe.
Yeah.
Like, definitely than what we were led to believe.
That's why it sells, because the truth of it is you could do it for 20 years and you may not see a dime. Like there is no limit to how long it may take you. But if you do the work like that's what we kind of ended up having to learn the hard way, is if you do the work long enough, the right way, and you make it a habit, then I mean, your odds are just infinitely better than just hoping it's going to fall into your lap, or trusting one of those guys where you're like, oh, I only have to take a month and then now I'm earning 6 figures. Like, I don't know, maybe. I know one person who lucked out that way, but I know way, way, way more people who like kind of had an idea, kind of got started on it, and within a couple months they're like, oh yeah, this is ridiculously hard.
Yep. That was one of our most sustaining motivators, I guess, was the only way we can guarantee our failure is to stop. And it really is true. Like your failure is not guaranteed. It feels like it sometimes, and it's crushing some days. And luckily, like, we staggered. I remember so many times throughout those years being like, thank God, it seems like when you're having a hard day, I'm having a strong day.
Yeah.
When I'm having a hard day, you're having a strong day. And we would be able, like, when one of us was feeling hopeless, the other one could help. But the nice part is, since we've been friends for so long, that when we were both feeling helpless, there's nothing but a good old-fashioned talking shit about the entire world and just venting about
just
your
bitching
rage.
About everything, anything you could possibly be upset about and complain about, and just diving deep into it for
hours at night after we put Blair to bed.
Good old-fashioned shit talk night will help solve a lot of
That
things.
bonded us a lot. That's that Aries and Scorpio bond I tell you guys about. That's how we made it through some of the fucking most disheartening and hopeless times. Because when Jared got laid off at the end of 2019, we're already on all baby food that I'm making at home. We are already not going out to eat. And we go on unemployment, which is, if you've ever been on unemployment, it is not your full paycheck.
Nope.
So we're on one quote unquote income, if you can even call it that at that point.
Yeah. A very low income.
And we basically had to make the choice when you started Podzilla, when you started your editing company. Again, it was we even got in arguments with our families.
A lot
of them. Because people are like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why wouldn't you just go get the next job, any job, the one? And it's because by this point, by end of 2019, and beginning of 2020, we realized, like, the more that you do that, the more it's going to take away. That job has to if you're going to take a job, it has to somehow be in alignment with the overall vision. That's what we decided.
And there really is something to be said about being backed into a corner and not having a safety net. And because that gives you the only option you have left is to succeed. And it is really amazing what the human mind is capable of doing when you put it in that situation of just like, no, you can't You can't just go take a job. You can't just take the easy way out. You can't just like move and find a cheaper place and take kind of the basic methods of spending less money or whatever. Like when you're really backed up against the wall and it's like, dude, I go hungry, I lose my house, or I make this shit work. Like that's when I mean, it doesn't have to be that extreme, but when that threat is more real, then it's like, oh, if it could happen. When you face that reality, it's pretty impressive what anyone is capable of doing to figure out a solution.
Mm-hmm. You're so much more resourceful than you think.
Mm-hmm.
I do promise you that. Even if you're not, you don't even have to get all the way backed against the wall. That's just usually what catalyzes that.
Yeah, just once that is real.
Yeah.
For plenty of people, it is. I mean, it's a month away, and plenty of other people, it's a little bit farther out, but it's once that is a real thing that will occur in your life and you realize that, then yeah, that's when it can really kick your ass into gear, I guess. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah. So by the beginning of 2020, we are on unemployment only. Like I said, as far as any income being brought in, Jared is still building up. He just had fresh started Podzilla right after that layoff. So we're not seeing cash flow from that. We're not seeing cash flow from the shop. And our unemployment is a total of $2,200 a month. And our mortgage alone is $1,600. It's over $1,600 a month at that point. So this takes into consideration none of our bills, none of our utilities, none of our eating, right? Like it was the start of putting things back on the credit card, essentially, and having to make those decisions to keep our good standing with our billers and creditors, basically, you know what I mean? And that was another choice that we made. Again, it doesn't necessarily work for everyone, but that was a choice that we made to continue. When we did, we saw it as an overall investment toward our future, toward everything that we wanted, to not give up on our dream and not just throw in the towel about everything. Which obviously brings us to the good old Pandy. And that was right when you ended up getting a next job. Will you tell us about how what led you to that one? Do you remember how you got there?
So that one, I spent like 4 months kind of just in that back against the wall phase while we were on unemployment. And I did a lot of work and I got a really good head start, and it came to the realization of like it's just that time to start looking again. Like this one doesn't have to be an incredibly long-term time because I have this stuff going, but I think I think it took me 4 or 5 months to make my first $1,000. And that
with Podzilla,
yeah, and it was good. Just like, I mean, we have a baby, we have a house. I can't be so stubborn that I'm like willing to let it all fall away, right, if it comes to it. But being in that position really kicked me into gear to put Podzilla in a decent place. So I started looking for jobs again, and I found the most random job. I showed up to the interview at my boss's condo. Actually, he ran it out of his house, and coincidentally, right after I took that job, because I like weird stuff like that type of work really excited me, because I don't want to be another number. I don't like standard work. Like if I'm going to take another job, I'm going to do something fun and interesting. So I'm going to take this. 2 days into that job, I got a job offer from like what would have been my dream job 2 years before that. Mm-hmm. And I took a day to think about it, and I called them back. I said, no, like I already took this one. I'm going to ride this out. Thank you for the offer. And so I rode that out.
This little startup, basically.
Yeah, it was a guy from Massachusetts that moved out here. He knew a lot about retail gas and like airline gas meters and stuff. So he replaced them, fixed them, and serviced them and all that. And since it was only him, like all the revenue came right back to him. So there was it was a pretty lucrative opportunity too. There's a lot of potential in that job. So I ended up taking that, and coincidentally, right after I took that job was when I started getting more consistent work for Podzilla.
Mm-hmm.
So probably 5 months or so, about 3 days, if not 5 days out of the week, I'd work anywhere from 8 to 12 hours a day. And there was a lot of times I'd be driving home from the job up in the mountains, and I'd get home right around midnight, anywhere between like 11 o'clock to 1 in the morning. Then I'd do Podzilla stuff. And there was a couple nights I remember working 21 hours straight.
Jesus.
And it was a lot of that, just constant grinding. And it just kept me going because I'm like, I have work for my business coming in now. Like I have to do it. And it was pretty intense for the first 5 months or so. It was just nonstop working all day, every day, all night, almost every night. And it's pretty intense.
Probably ended up being a different kind of lesson again.
Yeah. That taught me so much about pricing and stuff, because after, when you start out, you almost have to take any work just so people can recognize you, just so there's people to recommend you how good you are. And I was on Fiverr, so I had to get a bunch of reviews so I could have a 5-star, standard for my work. And
Fiverr is like freelancing.
Mm-hmm.
Etsy, by the way. It's almost exactly the same setup as Etsy, but instead of products, it's freelance servicers. It has hit and miss reviews. I personally think that Fiverr can be a really, really smart place to start when you need freelancing and you don't have the capital.
If you don't, they have a platform for you. You don't have to build any of that. You don't have to build a website. Pricing. You just make a profile. You don't have to deal with some of the finance stuff. You don't have to deal with the marketing stuff. Like there's a lot of advantages. They take their cut. That's why you don't get paid as much as you should, because they take a good percentage of whatever you make. But it's because they provide you with all those other tools that you otherwise would have to either learn about and create yourself, or pay someone to make for you, or research and spend time learning about. And so that's the trade-off of that one.
Yeah, it's definitely a trade-off too. And let's not forget that you got this job offer, I believe, 24 to 48 hours before the first lockdown went into effect.
Yeah. It was like the second job I was on when I got the notification on my phone that everything was shutting down.
Yep. And he became an essential worker. We were able to, as a shop in Denver, continue doing fulfilling online orders for shipping or pickup, as long as it was safe pickup. And based on just other restrictions and life restrictions, both of my business partners weren't able to service the shop almost at all. I did probably 90% of the work for, a really long time, honestly, for several months. And this is while Jared's working all of those insane hours, by the way. He's gone. We had just had him home for 6 months, right, because of unemployment and starting Podzilla. And now he's gone all the time. And that was an extremely hard mental health year for so many goddamn reasons. Holy cow. Obviously, pandemic on top of just all of that, like the unpredictability of it, just everything, obviously, right? The weight of that in general, on top of everything else that we were going through. And my my shop, as far as like back, like behind the curtain, behind the scenes for the three of us as business owners, just as people, just as individuals, life is like really shifting and changing. And not to digress too much, but one of my business partners, her husband became terminally ill and was in the hospital for 6 months, which brings us anyways to 2021, which, folks, just might be the worst of all.
Starts off with a bang.
Hi, everybody. So this concludes part 1 of 2 of this episode with Jared, with my husband. So it's worth it. I promise. I hope that you're invested. So we will be back with the second half of this episode very, very soon. So make sure that you are subscribed and following so you don't miss that. We'll see you soon. Hey, you magical human. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of That Witch podcast. If you want to support the show, the best way to do that is to share with a friend or give a shout out on your social media. You can also leave a 5-star rating and review on both Apple and Spotify. And if you can't get enough of all of our witchy magical content here in the neighborhood, you definitely want to make sure you're subscribed to my email newsletter, That Witch Gazette. It's a really fun, really convenient, one-stop shop to stay up to date on all of the news and happenings here in our neighborhood. If you have any questions, suggestions, ideas for the show, or if you'd like to sponsor an episode, you can send me a message at thatwitchnextdoor.com/conjurethatwitch. Thank you so much. I'll see y'all next time.